Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. We're going to talk about two very famous documents, Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal and Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. Both of these works use emotions to get people to pay attention and take action. They do this in very different ways, but both are powerful examples of how emotions can shape history. In this episode, we'll look at how each writer uses emotional appeal, called pathos, to persuade their audience. We'll explore how these two texts use emotions to speak to their readers and encourage change. First off, let's quickly talk about what we mean by pathos. Pathos is when a writer or speaker tries to make the audience feel something, whether it's sadness, anger, joy, or fear. The goal is to move the reader emotionally so they think differently or take action. Both Jonathan Swift and Thomas Jefferson use pathos to persuade their readers, but they do it in very different ways. Let's start with Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. This essay was written in 1729, and it's famous for using dark humor and shock value. Swift suggests that poor Irish families could sell their children as food to help solve Ireland's problems of poverty and overpopulation. Now you might be thinking, wait, that's crazy. And it is. Swift didn't really mean for people to eat babies. Instead, he was using this shocking idea to get people's attention. He wanted to make people think about how badly the poor were treated by the British and society in general. Swift uses a calm, logical tone to present his crazy idea. He sounds serious, which makes it even more shocking. For example, he writes, "I have been assured by a very knowing American that a young, healthy child, well nursed, is, at a year's old, a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food." This is meant to make the reader uncomfortable, obviously, forcing them to think about the cruel treatment of the poor. Swift also uses emotional language to describe the suffering of poor mothers. He paints a picture of mothers on the streets begging for help with their children in rags. This description is meant to make the reader feel pity for those women and children. Swift is trying to make us feel guilty about the way society ignores their pain. Even though Swift's suggestion is ridiculous, it works because it makes people feel the injustice and cruelty of the situation. Now, let's look at Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. This document was written in 1776 to explain why the American colonies wanted to break free from British rule. Jefferson also uses pathos to appeal to people's emotions, but in a different way. At the start, Jefferson makes a strong emotional statement. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." These words stir up feelings of justice, equality, and freedom. They make the reader think, I deserve rights and freedom just like anyone else. This statement sets the emotional tone for the entire declaration. Jefferson also uses emotional language when he lists the wrongs that King George III committed against the colonies. He talks about how the king has repeated injuries and usurpations. This builds up anger and frustration. The more Jefferson describes these wrongs, the more the reader feels that it's not just unfair, it's immoral. Jefferson is urging the colonies to take action because it's their duty to stand up to the king's tyranny. By the end of the Declaration, Jefferson's emotional appeal has created a sense of unity among the colonies. He makes the case that they must fight together for their freedom and that fighting for freedom is worth the struggle. So, what's the difference between how Swift and Jefferson use pathos? Both use strong emotional appeals, but they do it in very different ways. Swift uses dark humor and shock to make people feel uncomfortable and guilty about the suffering of the poor. He wants to make the powerful and wealthy think about their role in causing this suffering. Jefferson, on the other hand, uses emotion to unite people around a common cause, freedom. His appeal is about justice, equality, and the need to stand up against tyranny. While Swift's message is more about personal responsibility, Jefferson's is about collective action for a better future. Even though the two pieces are very different in tone and purpose, both use emotions to get people to pay attention and take action. Both writers understand that emotions can drive people to think and act in ways that logic alone cannot. But there are also risks to using emotions in writing. For example, Swift's proposal is so extreme and shocking that some people might have dismissed it as too ridiculous to take seriously. If the reader gets too focused on the absurdity of the idea, they might miss the real problem, the way society ignores the suffering of the poor. Similarly, Jefferson's Declaration of Independence uses powerful emotional language, but it's important to remember that not all people were treated equally in America at the time. While Jefferson talked about freedom and equality, he did not include enslaved people, women, or indigenous people in this vision. So while his emotional appeal worked for many, it also left some groups out of the promise of equality. In the end, both Swift and Jefferson show how pathos can be a powerful tool for making people care about important issues. Swift's dark satire and Jefferson's passionate call for freedom both inspire strong emotions in their audiences. But as we've seen, emotions can also complicate things. When people react too emotionally, they might not fully understand the issues, or worse, they might ignore the voices of the people who are most affected. That's it for today's episode. Both A Modest Proposal and the Declaration of Independence remind us that emotions are powerful. They can shape how we think, act, and make change in the world. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next time for more discussions on powerful writing and rhetoric. Until next time, keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep feeling. Goodbye!